Hi everybody, this is Josh Culp. We are learning Daf Shvui. We are on Daf Tzadi Gimmel of Masechet Bava Kamma, and I wanted to talk about the sugya that comments on the Mishnah's distinction between somebody who says, put out my eye, and somebody who says, tear my clothing or destroy my material goods. In the case of put out my eye or injure my person in a serious fashion, the person who says that, if they say, I will exempt you for doing that, the person who does it is not exempt. Whereas in the case of destroy my clothing or something like that, and I say, I will exempt you, then you are exempt. Which gets back to that same idea that I think is a very simple idea, that a person has a right to destroy or to use their own things the way they see fit. But a person doesn't have a right to harm their own body, to cut off their hand. I mean, major harm done to one's body is not allowed. And the Gemara, despite the fact that I think the Mishnah is quite simple, the Gemara asks, what's the difference between the two? And I think the simple reason is the first reason explained in the Gemara. A person isn't accustomed to, they're not really, like a person says, cut off my hand, they don't really want you to cut off their hand. Something's wrong with that person. It's an ascribed belief, right? Even if they think that they want to cut off their hand, they don't, and therefore you're not allowed to cut off their hand. Whereas a person might cogently want to destroy some of their property for whatever reason. And therefore they're allowed to allow other people to destroy their property, even if it's not a particularly good thing to be doing. But the second reason is, I think, much more interesting, and that's brought up originally by Rav Sheshet. It's backed up by Rabbi Yoshaya, and that's Mishum Pagam Mishpacha, that it is it's bad, right? It embarrasses or it hurts the family to have a person, and here I want to be careful. I don't think you could read this two ways. I'll read it a way that I think is disturbing and a way that I think is not disturbing. The disturbing way is it is embarrassing for the family to have in the family somebody who is missing a limb. And that would be true even if somebody is born missing a limb. That is, of course, not an attitude that I endorse or laud, but I do think could be a faithful representative of the way people thought before the modern age. And as you may know about me, I am a believer that there's been progress in human thought over the last 1,000 years. Not uniform progress, but there has been progress. And I'm glad that we live in a world in which we are not ashamed that we have members of our family who are, I don't know exactly what the word is, but let's say differently abled and have differently limbed, is probably a good way of putting it. The other way of putting it is it's a shame for the family, it's a stain on the family to have somebody in it who acts in such a crazy way to have one of their own limbs cut off. That has its own problems too. I don't really think in the modern period we should be ashamed of our members of our family. But on the other hand, what I want to bring up, most important, I think, in this Gemara, is that a person isn't just an individual. A person is also a part of a web of people. The closest web to a person is their family. Beyond that might be their community, their close group of friends, their people of their religion, people of their state, right? It's too broad to say all of humanity, but it is a person's rights are not completely subsumed by what the community wants or what their family wants, but it is something to be taken into the equation. Right? It is not a factor that we can easily ignore. And that's what I think Rav Sheshet and Rabbi Yoshaya are talking about, Pagam Mishpacha. Somebody who wants to do something that would harm their family, they're not allowed to do that. Right? They're not allowed to tell somebody, you can cut off my hand, not just because it's a harm to themselves, but because they're part of the web, a particularly close web of their family, and they have to guard their family's interests as well. Okay, thank you.